Himmel, Heider, and Eisen are ready to retire from adventuring after their 10-year quest. Frieren, whose lifespan is much longer, considers the 10 years to be trivially short and plans to travel and learn new spells. To her colleagues' amusement, she promises to show them a better site to observe the meteor shower at its next occurrence in 50 years. Frieren keeps her word and returns 50 years later to find that Himmel and Heider have become elderly, and Eisen is middle-aged. The week-long journey to Frieren's viewing site reminds the party of their past adventures. Himmel the hero dies of old age shortly after the expedition. At his funeral, Frieren tearfully realizes she did not adequately get to know him and decides to learn as much about humans as possible. 20 years later, she visits Heider to find that he has adopted a war orphan, 9-year-old Fern. Heider, suffering from death anxiety in his advanced age, asks Frieren to research life-extending magic and tutor Fern in magic in her spare time. She agrees after seeing Fern is already remarkably skilled despite her youth. Frieren spends 4 years tutoring Fern while translating an ancient grimoire concerning immortality. Heider collapses and can no longer walk. Fern declines to visit immediately, explaining that she must train continuously to become a mage before Heider dies. She wants to show him this progress as thanks for his intervening in her planned suicide and adopting her. Frieren expedites her translation. The grimoire revealed nothing about life extension. Heider admits that he used this prospect to ensure that Frieren would stay to tutor Fern. Fern finally masters an offensive spell, and Heider dies. She joins Frieren in her travels to continue to learn. They use magic to easily complete mundane tasks for townspeople, especially in return for documents about magic. During a routine cleaning of a statue of Himmel the hero, Frieren decides to decorate it with his favorite flower. The flower seems to have gone extinct in the region, and they spend 6 months searching for one. Fern is surprised and frustrated about Frieren's commitment to a seemingly minor cosmetic task. While reflecting about her motivation and friendship with Himmel, Frieren finds the live flower in a rodent seed hoard, allowing her to conjure a field of them in his memory. Fern realizes it is important to have a passion, be it for magic or anything else. Fern notices Frieren acting suspiciously and follows her to several unusual and dangerous shops. Frieren admits despite her efforts, she has learned almost nothing about Fern and was trying to think of a gift for Fern's birthday. Fern is happier knowing Frieren at least tried to learn about her. Frieren decides to revisit places she visited with Himmel, Heider, and Eisen. The first place is a village where Frieren sealed away Qual, the demon of corruption. The seal will break soon, so Frieren must defeat Qual. She is surprised to learn Himmel checked the seal every year until he died and was always confident Frieren would visit before it broke. Frieren reveals Qual invented a killing spell that bypassed all barriers and armor to strike the body directly, which was so powerful at the time, she could only manage to seal rather than destroy him. Qual is unsealed, but Frieren reveals in the 80 years he has been asleep human mages learned and reverse-engineered his spell, allowing them to develop new defense spells to block it. Unable to harm them, Qual is easily killed when Frieren uses his own spell on him, which he does not know how to block. Frieren realizes the village elder is a boy she met at the village 80 years ago, reminding her fondly of Himmel. Fern also points out Himmel must have had deep trust in Frieren to be so certain she would return to deal with Qual. In exchange for cleaning a beach, Frieren receives a grimoire written by famous Mage Flam, even though it is fake. The work is finished by New Year when the locals traditionally watch the sunrise. Frieren, a notorious late sleeper, missed the sunrise during her last visit, upsetting her friends. This time she makes it but finds the sunrise dull, until she sees Fern enjoying herself and realizes why missing it last time upset everyone, because they were supposed to go together. They then visit Eisen's home, having not seen him in 30 years. He asks for help searching Volume 50 Basin for Flam's genuine grimoire, as Flam supposedly found a way to speak to the dead, and he thinks it will be beneficial for Frieren to speak with Himmel one more time. Frieren recalls Flam was her human master 1,000 years ago, who instructed her to find her home if she ever felt regret and wanted to speak to the dead. Friaren recovers Flam's genuine grimoire, which describes where all souls go, Oriole, at the northernmost point of the continent where the Demon Lord's castle is located. On the way home, Eisen is happy Friaren is learning to care about people and is a good teacher to Fern. Friaren asks Eisen to accompany them to Oriole, but Eisen declines, citing he would slow her down in his old age. However, Eisen also reminds them that their original adventure to the Demon King's castle took 10 years, which Friaren acknowledges. Friaren acknowledges 10 years is potentially a tenth of Fern's lifespan, but Fern decides to follow her. A short way into the journey, they enter a village where several people disappeared after seeing ghosts of their deceased relatives. Friaren suspects an Einsam, a monster that lures victims with illusion magic. The illusions are easily destroyed with attack magic, but as this involves attacking the ghosts of people they loved, even experienced warriors cannot fight back and become its prey. Fern is almost caught by Hyder's ghost, but Friaren easily shoots Himmel's ghost, exposing the Einsam so Fern can destroy it. Continuing on the journey, Friaren decides to kill a dragon to collect a grimoire from its nest. This requires a strong warrior, so they seek out Stark, one of Eisen's students who once defeated the dragon in a staring contest and now lives nearby. Stark admits he has never killed a monster before and only won the famous staring contest because he was frozen with fear. Friaren gives him until morning to decide to help. Fern doubts he is capable, but Friaren is confident since, thanks to Eisen's training, Stark possesses the strength to cut through solid rock with his axe. Stark admits that even though he is strong enough to take on the dragon, he is too afraid to. Fern encourages Stark by telling him all he needs is resolve. The next day, Stark reluctantly agrees to distract the dragon despite still being scared. However, Friaren points out that Eisen was always scared as well before a major battle. Stark then engages the dragon and manages to kill it without needing any assistance from Friaren and Fern. Friaren collects the grimoire, and Stark agrees to accompany her on her journey. The trio head north to the city of Vol, but find out the checkpoint is closed due to increased monster activity in the northern lands. Friaren is content to stay in the city to continue her magic research, but Fern and Stark grow concerned when they find out it may take up 2 years before the checkpoint can be reopened. Stark reveals to Fern that he wants to go on an adventure so that he can return to Eisen to regale him with his stories. Fortunately, the city's castellan recognizes Friaren and, believing that she is headed north to pacify the monsters, gladly opens the checkpoint for her. Friaren and her party are given a hero's send-off, which embarrasses Friaren, but Fern and Stark are excited that this marks the official beginning of their adventure. Friaren and her party continue to travel north, and Friaren explains the elven race has been declining since, due to their long lives, they are too apathetic to even reproduce. They pass by another village with statues of her and her original party who celebrate Liberation Day. Friaren recalls a memory where Himmel was adamant the party leave behind statues of themselves as reminders to Friaren that they actually existed and are not simply fairy tales. Heading to another city, Friaren spots demons and tries to attack them, only to be arrested by the city guards for threatening peace envoys. Fern and Stark visit Friaren in the dungeon and reveal that one of the Demon Lord's lieutenants, Aura, has recently regained her power and has been waging war against the city for 28 years, leading both sides to open peace talks. However, Friaren warns from experience that demons are incapable of being reasoned with since they only learn human language as a way to deceive humans. Just as Friaren predicted, the demon peace envoy led by Lugner are simply there to trick the city into lowering its barrier so Aura can raise it with her army. However, one of his attendants, Drott, heads to the dungeon to assassinate Friaren, but she warns him that she is far more powerful than Aura. Drott ignores Friaren's warning and attacks her, but she easily kills him and escapes the dungeon. The city's Graf, Granat, becomes suspicious about Drott's disappearance and Friaren's escape and confronts Lugner. With his plot exposed, Lugner captures Granat with the intention of forcing him to disable the city's barrier. Meanwhile, Fern and Stark agree to warn Granat about Lugner when they come across Friaren. Friaren refuses to help them against Lugner, confident that the two are strong enough to defeat him. Instead, Friaren leaves to confront Aura, who is waiting outside the city with her army. Outside the city, Friaren confronts Aura face to face. Fern and Stark manage to get Granat to safety in the town church, where he warns that Aura's trump card is a magic artifact called the Scales of Obedience, which measure the amount of mana she, an opponent, possesses. The one with the greater amount of mana can then dominate the loser, which is how she has created an army of puppets. Friaren destroys some of Aura's puppets, and seeing that she still has no understanding of humanity, concludes that she can kill her like a monster. Back in the city, Lugner and his assistant Liney ambush Fern and Stark. While the demons initially have the upper hand, Stark learns that Liney copied Eisen's fighting style from observing him in a battle, but lacks the strength to execute his moves with killing force, and uses that to his advantage to purposely take a blow from her axe so he can land a killing blow on her. Fern seizes the initiative by taking advantage of her main strength of being able to cast her spells more quickly than even Friaren, eventually overwhelming Lugner's defenses and killing him. Mortally wounded, Lugner is left to wonder how Fern is so powerful, until he comes to the realization that she had been suppressing her mana to look weaker than she actually is, which is considered a taboo among demon mages. Fern then finishes off Lugner. In a flashback to 1,000 years ago, Flam comes across a destroyed elf village and finds Friaren the only survivor, having managed to kill the demon general attacking her. Flam decides to take Friaren on as her apprentice and teaches her how to indefinitely suppress her mana. She also teaches Friaren how to fight demons. Since demons are proud and self-confident in their own magic and are incapable of suppressing their own mana, Flam explains that by suppressing their mana, they can trick demons into feeling a false sense of security where they could be destroyed in a surprise attack. Flam's last instruction to Friaren is to keep training and suppressing her mana and live in obscurity until she is powerful enough to defeat the Demon King. 1,000 years later, Himmel and his party track down Friaren and attempt to recruit her. Seeing that Himmel can instinctively sense her true power, Friaren decides to join them. In the present, Aura uses the Scales of Obedience, but is horrified when Friaren shows the true extent of her mana. Aura is dominated by Friaren, and she is forced to behead herself under Friaren's order. After paying proper respects to Aura's victims and enjoying Granat's hospitality, Friaren and her party continues on their journey, but plans to drop by at Osserst, a large magical city in the Northern Lands, to get a first-class mage certification that will enable them to travel through the Northern Plateau. However, on the way, they get lost in a blizzard at the foot of the Schwer Mountains, and Stark begins to suffer hypothermia. Fortunately, they find an emergency cabin and meet an elven monk named Kraft. Friaren and her party stay with Kraft inside the cabin for 6 months to ride out the winter. Kraft then confides in Friaren that he decided to worship the goddess because with all of his old friends dead and his accomplishments long forgotten, only she can remember his deeds and praise him when he finally goes to heaven. He then asks about Friaren's past, offering to praise her in the place of the goddess. This triggers a flashback where Hyder once said the exact same words to Friaren, and she declines Kraft's offer, stating somebody has already praised her. Kraft advises that Friaren cherish her friends and companions before parting ways with her and her party. On their way to Osserst, Friaren and her party stop by the Village of the Sword, the resting place of the legendary hero's sword, so that Friaren can fulfill her obligation to regularly clear out the monsters attracted by the sword. Stark sees the hero's sword still embedded in a stone, and is confused because he was told stories that Himmel successfully pulled the sword from the stone. Friaren remarks that Himmel failed at pulling the sword, but stories claimed otherwise after the fact. She then recalls how Himmel was not discouraged at all, simply saying that he will prove himself a hero by defeating the demon lord without the sword. The party then heads to the next town, where Fern learns it is Stark's 18th birthday, so she asks him what gift he would like. Stark reveals that he is not used to getting presents because his warrior family never celebrated them, believing he was a failure for being a coward, especially when he ran away when a monster attacked their village. Fern reassures him that she and Friaren will make sure he will not run away and helps him buy a silver bracelet. Upon returning to the inn, Frieren has prepared Hamburg steaks, which Eisen had always traditionally done on birthdays. Frieren reveals to Stark that, among warrior cultures, a Hamburg steak is given to those acknowledged as trying their hardest. This triggers a memory of his older brother Stoltz secretly cooking him Hamburg steak on his birthday, as well as being the person telling Stark to flee the village so that he can live. Stark then feels some closure, realizing that his brother truly loved him. Frieren rescues Sane, a local priest, from a swamp, and Sane returns the favor by curing Stark after he is bit by a venomous snake. Sane's brother reveals that Sane has a natural talent for healing spells, and asks Frieren to push Sane into becoming an adventurer, a dream that he had held as a child, but eventually lost his passion for, culminating in him turning down an invitation from his best friend 10 years ago. Frieren gains an interest in Sane because his apathy reminds her of the apathy she felt before Himmel recruited her. Wanting to save Sane from his own apathy, Frieren takes it upon herself to convince Sane to become an adventurer. Sane finally admits that the reason he did not leave the village was because he knew his brother turned down an opportunity to move to the Holy City so as not to separate Sane from his hometown. However, Sane's brother slaps him and points out that he never regretted his decisions, but Sane clearly does. This finally convinces Sane to join Frieren's party until he can find the whereabouts of his friend. After reaching the next town, Fern and Stark have a falling out after Stark fails to get a birthday present for Fern. Sane advises Fern that a young man like Stark cannot be expected to remember everything, and she should treat him less harshly and be more honest with her feelings. Fern tries to apologize to Stark, but he apologizes first, admitting that wanted to pick Fern's present together with her, but was too nervous to do so. As Stark buys a new bracelet for Fern, Frieren praises Sane for being a proper adult, like Hyder. On the way to the next village, Frieren notes the bracelet Stark bought for Fern has a similar design to a ring Himmel once bought her. A flying monster suddenly attacks their wagon, and while Frieren manages to kill it, the ring is lost in the confusion. As the party focus on repairing the wagon, Sane notes that the design on the bracelet and ring is the mirrored lotus, which in the language of flowers symbolizes eternal love. Stark is embarrassed at buying something with such intimate connotations, but Fern does not mind. Frieren searches for her ring, and the merchant there helping gives her a spell that can locate lost accessories. After Frieren recovers her ring, she recalls the time Himmel bought it for her. She picked out the ring initially, but in hindsight Himmel knew about its hidden meaning and he gracefully placed it on her finger as if proposing to her. Frieren and her party arrive at a village and discover a monster has cursed its residents to sleep. Fern, Stark, and even Frieren succumb to the curse, with only Sane, being a priest, having resistance to curses. Sane manages to wake Frieren up long enough for her to kill the monster, even if he worried that a miscommunication may make things worse. Later, Frieren and her party reach the city of Vorik, the relay point to Osserst. Just then, a noble named Orden sees Stark and asks him if he could pose as his slain son Wirt during an upcoming soiree to keep the morale among the people high, as they are told Wirt is alive from a recent battle and is recovering. Frieren initially refuses, but because they are running out of money, she relents when Orden offers to pay them in gold as well as a grimoire. Stark, and eventually Fern, has to learn proper etiquette before the coming soiree. They are both able to successfully play their roles at the soiree, and it concludes without issue. Orden then offers Stark to stay at Vorik, but Stark declines, pointing out he cannot be a replacement for Wirt and Orden cannot be a replacement for his father. He also wishes to eventually return to Eisen to tell him about his adventure. As Frieren selects the Grim where she wants, Stark, Fern, and Sane watch Orden training his second son, Mutt. Frieren decides to stop by a village to visit one of her old friends, an elderly dwarf named Old Man Volume 50, who swore to protect the village in memory of his deceased human wife. Old Man Volume 50 is delighted at Frieren's visit, and spends the next week catching up with her and training Stark. However, Frieren can tell that Old Man Volume 50 is getting increasingly senile in his old age, and promises to carry on his memory in the future like she carries on the memory of Himmel, Hyder, and Eisen. Frieren and her party continue on towards Osserst until Sane stops at the final crossroads before the city, asking the local village if they had seen his friend, nicknamed Gorilla Warrior. The only person who remembers where Gorilla Warrior went is a stubborn old woman who has the party complete several errands for her, with the final one being cleaning the statues of a pair of forgotten heroes. Frieren recognizes one of the statues as Kraft, while Sane remembers that an identical pair of statues were what inspired him and Gorilla Warrior to become adventurers in the first place. The party stays at the village, but their departure is halted when a snowstorm falls, keeping them in the village for an entire month. During this time, Fern gets angry at Stark, and Sane discovers that it was because Stark accidentally grabbed her shoulder with too much strength, startling her. Sane convinces the two to make up, and after the storm subsides, he leaves the party to look for Gorilla Warrior while Frieren and the rest set for Osserst. On the way there, Fern gets sick, and they stop in a small village to treat her. In the occasion, Frieren reveals to Stark that she usually grabs Fern's hand when she is sick to give some emotional support, and reminisces when Himmel did the same for her when she was traveling with him. After Fern gets better, the party finally arrives at Osserst in time for Frieren and Fern to take the first-class mage exam. On the road to Osserst, Fern and Frieren discuss the rarity of first-class mages and the difficulty of obtaining the certification to become one. Fern feels uncertain that she could pass the exam, but Frieren lets her know that mana capacity is not everything, and that she herself has lost 11 times to people with a lower mana capacity than herself. Elsewhere, a mage named Yubel is approached by 3 bandits. She taunts them hoping to fight, but Kraft intervenes and fights them off. Kraft tells Yubel that he was protecting the bandits from her, as he is aware she murdered a number of bandits. Yubel introduces herself to him, and they part ways. Fern and Frieren arrive at the association and manage to sign up for the first-class exam. After preparing for 2 months, they take the exam. Frieren is teamed with Lawine and Can, who are childhood friends and rivals, while Fern ends up being teamed with Yubel. The first test of the exam is to capture a still, but this proves to be no easy task as the bird moves faster than sound. Frieren is unsure of how to catch it due to Lawine and can constantly bickering, but she notices they have almost flawless teamwork despite that. After Frieren saves her from a monster, Can confides that even though she does not like Lawine, she stays with her because Lawine can push her to improve herself. Can then mentions something she noticed about the still's behavior, which helps Frieren come up with a plan to capture one. Fern and her party consisting of Yubel and Lan manage to catch a still and decide to lay back due to the threat from other mages who may want to steal their bird. After discussing with Can and Lawine, Frieren hatches a plan. They decide to freeze the lake within the testing grounds while infusing smaller pools of water with mana. Because the still are very sensitive to mana, leaving a single pool uncontaminated ensures that the still will flock to it by default when they are thirsty. Elsewhere, Dinkin's party observes the water freezing done by Lawine. Dinkin determines that Frieren's party must have a plan up their sleeves and decides they should pursue them to steal their still. Another party consisting of Air, Werbel, and Schraff ambush Fern's party as they attempt to look for water, and the two parties end up fighting over the captured still. During this fight, Frieren suppresses her mana near an uncontaminated pool of water and manages to capture an unsuspecting still. Dinkin's party detects her casting magic, and they ambush Frieren's party to try and take their still. The battle between Fern's team and Werbel's team continues. Fern defeats Air by overwhelming her with rapid-fire ordinary attack magic. Air remarks that Fern's magic is entirely devoid of character. Yubel is restrained and defeated by Werbel. However, Werbel's hesitation in killing her immediately allows Fern to arrive in time to save Yubel. Land easily defeats Scharf using illusion magic. Werbel collects his defeated team members and shares his motivation for fighting demons. He reveals his history, explaining that he fights demons to impress a girl he loved back in his hometown. Their team manages to remain relevant in the exam as Werbel comes across a still by luck and captures it with his binding magic. Laufen steals Frieren's team's still with his super-fast movement spell. Meanwhile, the remainder of Dinkin's team approaches Frieren's team as Laufen runs away. Dinkin reveals that he knows Frieren is the same legendary mage from the hero's party. Richter splits up Friaren's team and states he will either kill Lewine or so that Friaren's team cannot advance in the exams. Denkin tells Richter to hold back unless absolutely necessary, as the first-class mage's title is not something worth killing over. However, Richter disagrees and talks about the privilege the title grants. Specifically, Ciri, the leader of the Continental Mages Association, has promised that anyone who achieves the first-class title will be granted any one spell they request from her, if she is capable of providing it. After they finish exchanging words, the two parties begin their battle. 1,000 years ago, Flam introduces Friaren to Ciri, who was her master. Ciri offers any single spell to Friaren, but Friaren declines, stating that the best part of magic is the pursuit. Ciri criticizes Friaren's apparent lack of ambition, but Flam states firmly that Friaren will be the one to defeat the Demon King. This is because Friaren can envision a peaceful era, unlike herself or Ciri. In the present time, Friaren and Denkin's parties engage in battle. Lewine can do their best to win, but the difference in mana compared to Richter is too great, and he manages to restrain them. He says he will spare them as long as Denkin wins his fight. Denkin uses high-level spells to overwhelm Friaren, but she reacts swiftly and manages to defeat him with a close-range magic blast. Friaren baits Lawfen into the open by threatening to kill Denkin. When Lawfen attacks, Friaren intercepts her and recovers the still. After restraining the two, Denkin reveals that he wants to become a first-class mage so that he can return to his hometown, which is located deep within the Northern Plateau. Aware that Richter will likely kill Can and Lewine due to Denkin's loss, Friaren chooses to destroy Ciri's barrier, shocking the examiners. With the barrier destroyed, Rainfall reaches the exam area and can use her water magic to defeat Richter. Fern's team takes shelter in a cave, with Land warning them that they will be rivals in the second exam. As Friaren's team leaves, Denkin's team escapes their bindings and finds a weakened party to attack and steal a still from. The first exam concludes, and 6 successful teams are shown. The examiners congratulate them and announce a break before the next exam, which will take place in 3 days. Meanwhile, Stark waits at a tavern for Friaren and Fern's return. Friaren and Fern return to their lodging. Fern berates Stark for drinking and staying up late at night. Friaren suggests improving Fern's mood by taking her out to dinner at a restaurant she visited 80 years ago. Richter meets Denkin and Lawfen at his storefront, who ask him for directions to a restaurant Denkin once visited as well. Land is approached by Yubel, who explains that she can copy magic if she can empathize with the person who cast it. Yubel demonstrates this by binding Land with Werbel's spell and tries to interrogate him in order to steal his cloning magic, but he convinces her that it's pointless. Denkin's group finds the restaurant they were looking for and runs into Friaren's party as well as Land and Yubel, but they choose to focus on their own meal. In a flashback, Himmel and his party are shown eating at the establishment. The chef proclaims that his restaurant will always be exceptional and use the same flavors. In the present, Friaren remarks the food has not stayed the same, but instead tastes much better than in the past. The next morning, Stark has to mediate an argument between Friaren and Fern, and they head out to get snacks. Lewine can spend the day together in town and run into Stark and the others at a bakery. While they are walking together as a larger group, Werbel approaches Stark and recruits him for a monster hunting request from the Magic Association. At the inn, Lewine can hand baked goods to Friaren to thank her for helping them pass the first test. Friaren recalls Himmel telling her that he became a hero because changing a person's life in even a small way will cause them to remember him long after he is gone. While Friaren and others talk, they receive the notification for the second test. Lewine and Ken are discouraged after seeing that Sense is proctoring the test, since nobody has ever been able to pass her tests. Sense congratulates the 18 individuals who passed the first test and proceeds to outline the parameters of the second test. To pass the test, the examinees must reach the bottom of the ruins of the King's Tomb dungeon. Sense, a pacifist who despises fighting, declares that everyone reaching the bottom will pass. She also distributes bottles that have shattered, will summon a golem that will help the mage escape the dungeon, but using it will automatically fail the mage who uses it, making it a last resort. In addition, The bottles will automatically shatter at dawn of the next day, making that the time limit for the exam. An examinee notes that no adventuring party has ever successfully cleared this dungeon. Decides to follow Friaren and Fern,